and be tossed around like a piece of trash, and society accepts that. And what happens next?
Yeah.
It's a genocide.
Right.
And I think we're talking about number 8, which is manipulate. Yeah, yeah.
We were discussing the 10 stages, and for me, the 8th step always gets me in the gut. That's manipulation.
Yeah.
And manipulation says that a physical wound unhealed can be exploited by the next one who comes in.
Exactly. And that happens when we are afraid to go there, afraid to face the truth. However painful it may be, it's a very important stage of healing. Are we ready to face the truth? If we cannot face the truth, then what are we going to look at into the face? You know, this is where things really become really crucial. Do we have the courage to face facts and face the truth, however painful it may be, because that's the beginning of healing.
I was quite interested when we were going to have this conversation this time. I went and looked at the medical process of healing. I thought, because also when Arturo was up here earlier, and just giving an insight into human in nature, human as a natural thing. I think we're so disconnected from our nature, and we're so disconnected from experiencing ourselves in nature. So we can abuse ourselves, we can abuse others, and we abuse nature. So I think if we can find examples more and more that bring us to our natural state, it starts to also just, you know, shift our consciousness a little bit. So what I saw was the process of a physical body healing. The first step is homeostasis. No, hemostasis. So that's just where the platelets come out and some coagulation is allowed. And then the second stage is inflammation. And that's when vessels open a little bit, so it can become inflamed, but then nutrients come to the site. And then the next one is proliferation. And that's when collagen comes and rebuilds a structure. And then the last one is, I'm going to not remember it, but essentially that's when itching and stretching and in a wound occurs. So it could feel like we haven't yet gotten there, but it's the last stage, which is the remodeling of tissue.
Definitely. And you can feel like there's a process going on, because this wound does not just come, it came with pain. And dealing with it also, we have to deal with pain.
And it takes the time it takes.
Exactly. It takes the time. It will take you 2 years. It could take me 10 years. And that's where we need to understand that there's no like a thermometer or like a phase, but at least the most important thing, are you on the right pathway to healing? Are you, however painful this wound may be? Because I remember my first production when I was working with some of women who had even gone like through mass rapes and all that. I was like, I've never been mass raped. How am I even going to feel 2% of what these women went through? It was hard. But through talking with them and trusting that space and opening that space of trust, and knowing that I'm not just here to hear their story, I'm here to listen to their story and be part of this and try to connect. It was painful for them. It was also painful for me, not to their level, but the fact that this woman could open up those layers you're talking about, it felt like a boil burst. And that's when they start breathing. Because most of these wounds are just the physical body, and the body is just like a tool, but there's the inner universe, there's the spirit, there's the mind, there's the things you've stored that keep bringing this pain, this hurt. And this is what we need to pay to. And I think it was when we were talking about spiritual hygiene, that what is it that I'm storing in me that keeps causing me pain? And what is that I need to get rid of? So it is painful, but I need to get rid of it. Yeah.
I was having a quick chat with Arturo in the break, and I said to him, what's his experience of people who come because to Earth University, because surely they come with wounds. And do they, as part of their process, acknowledge that? And he said, absolutely. And I said, what do you do? And he says, we allow for it. And it struck me because what you said in one of our conversations is you must create the space for it.
Yeah, because it's very important in the pathway to social reconstruction, like the 10 steps to social reconstruction. I think it's number 5, it's empathy. And it's the ability to share and understand the feelings of one another. And not until we come to that level. And it will be really hard because, like I think I mentioned earlier, there are many things that can only be seen through the eyes that have cried. And if you've not dropped a tear and you come to help me walk that path, before you invite that in your space, it's going to be hard.
So before you try to lead me,
Yeah.
or before you try to help me, cry with me.
Yeah. And you will not perform it because it's a spiritual thing. There's a spiritual level we have to connect because tears don't just come. And you can, this is what also like what I was talking about. I mean, even when you're performing these stories or trying to understand these stories, you have to step in the skin of the story and listen to this story and take your egos aside and just be present in this story. Because this story is asking you, are you listening to me? Are you with me in this moment? Then that's when trust walks in the space. And when trust walks in the space, there's a more healthier conversation.
And we read a piece earlier this year by the Nigerian writer. He calls himself a recovering psychologist, Bayo Akomolafe. And in it, he spoke about, he called it the fissures, fault lines, rifts, splinters, wounds, and all the many cousins of cracks.
Yeah.
And what he was suggesting was that, let's call it just for interest's sake, although I think there are many metaphors and application, but the victim and the perpetrator actually go into that crack together and feel in that crack together. And then from that place, there's the possibility of a gift.
Yeah.
And that gift is perhaps a reimagined possible future.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we stand the risk of just repeating and repeating, even though we say we're trying to escape what came in the past.
Yeah, and that crack comes because there was a rupture. And because of that rupture was caused by attention, like a volcano, how it erupts, there's a fire underneath. So that rupture, if you've not identified earlier, you get that crack. But if you've gone through the crack and identify the cracks, the different cousins of cracks, if you don't identify those cracks and respond to that crack, where do we head? Because you are just being apart, you're setting aside this crack, but this crack is actually where the conversation lies.
Yeah. So see the cracks and the discomfort as precisely the site of where you will have the inspired thought.
Yeah.
What struck me also in that many cousins of cracks was 30 years later, seeing the youth perform your play. And perform it despite the 100 days every year with an intensity of pain. And I asked you before, I said, is there a risk of re-wounding? And I'm just going to leave it there and ask for your response.
Yeah, so the performance you saw was called Generation 25. And Generation 25 was a production I worked on 25 years after the Rwandan genocide against Tutsi. So I realized that after 25, a new generation was born that has nothing to do with what happened in that country, yet carried emotions. And those emotions, there was a generational thing going on. Why would a person who never saw murder or all these atrocities that happened, why would they get traumatized? That means whichever environment they've grown in, they are adults. Somewhere down the line, an adult passed on this energy on them, this negative energy, this pain, this trauma, this anger. And I realized that this is dangerous. If somebody is still struggling with the question of identity of crisis, saying, am I a child of a killer? Or I thought I was a victim. So where do I lie? Was my father a perpetrator or my mother was a victim? Where am I? So they So for me, that was a wake-up call. Like, are we having the right conversation with the young generation, or we just think they're not part of this? There's a conversation for the adults and a conversation for the adults. But when we opened up this space, there was so much anger. And this was a space for them that they could easily breathe out and vomit everything they felt. And for me, I felt like, wow, this is the kind of conversation we should be having. Otherwise, we are going to have crack after crack, crack after crack. And victims of yesterday could become the perpetrators of tomorrow.
It sounds to me like Rwanda, as an example, is building the muscle of healing. So the ability to constantly heal, to not shy away from pain, not shy away from fear, but to go towards it because they have an experience of it, you have an experience of it, and so you build the muscle of healing as a society. You have the ability to heal sort of on a consistent basis because there is no terminal point. There's no time when it's all done.
Yeah, it comes with a spirit of resilience, regardless of what we have gone through. You know, at the end of the day, this body was succumbed, was beaten, was wounded, was this, but the spirit of Rwanda never died. The spirit to survive and thrive. And I think for me, that is what I learned from a country I call home, because I was not born and raised in Rwanda. I was born and raised as a refugee, went back, and then I realized Rwanda was not just a home, it was a school. And I'm the artist I am today because of Rwanda is a school. Every day I learn from my fellow Rwandans. I meet a woman and I'm like, how on earth were you able to go through this? And I'm challenged. So that muscle of healing, there's no choice. Where else do you go? You have to thrive. I mean, if you wake up one morning and you're 50-something years and you're like, I'm left with these years, I've lost everything. But let me spend these years positively, just sticking on this and just, clean my heart, cleanse all the head, just invite what I need in like nutrients. Let me just invite, instead of, dreaming and spending my time on somebody who killed my people, I'm going to invite the people I lost. And I just forgive and let go. So the ability to forgive, even someone who has done for you the worst, is also something very not usual, but necessary.
Do you want to say something? You spoke about cleansing. So there's a cleansing process, which is an internal cleansing. But in Rwanda, there's also umunganda, which is a physical cleansing of the streets. And you say something?
Yeah. So every end of last Saturday of every month, we do cleaning. But sometimes the streets are too clean, there's nothing to clean. And then I ask myself, as an artist, we have crazy minds. I'm like, what is this woman really sweeping? She's really sweeping like there is that. Then you start unpacking that moment. I'm like, she's actually sweeping. There's more to this cleaning. It is psychological. She feels cleaner. And there's a time I was also working on a documentary called, it was on forgiveness and justice, and we went to interview a perpetrator somewhere 70 kilometers from Rwanda. And I found this perpetrator dressed all in white, like from foot to toe. I was like, why all in white? And he said, so when he was killing people during genocide and they ran to the nearby hospital, he would also follow them to kill them in the hospital. And then, of course, he served his sentences, he's asked for forgiveness, the community is trying to accept him back, but of course they suffer with the spirit of guilt, like everyone's forgiven me, but I don't forgive myself. They also have a crack to fix. But I was really astonished by how he's obsessed with just wearing white. I'm like, why white in a very dirty road? It's not a very, it's in a village. And you find that there's something about to keep cleaning yourself when you feel dirty, when there's some dirty things you're dealing with. So that was just my thing, that we clean so much that to some level it's more than just cleaning.
Yeah. Thank you for that. There's also the symbolism. Let's see. What shall we talk about now?
Let's just listen from them.
Yeah, let's see what people are thinking. Yeah. Hope?
Do a monologue for us to talk about what you have just been telling us. A monologue that would make sense to us.
A monologue?
Because it's all theoretical now.
Okay.
Give us a monologue. You are an actress. Do a monologue.
Oh, wow. A monologue. Would you want, what monologue in what kind
Whatever you think relates to what we've been talking about. Just give us a monologue now.
What about?
Wow, I need to look for a monologue, people. I'm going to give you a monologue of a British journalist, what he wrote when he came to Rwanda in 1994. It's called Below the Village. And I don't have my glasses. Do you want to read it for me?
I can.
Yeah, so I don't have my glasses, so she's going to read for me. Is that okay, sir?
No, I thought maybe from your work, all right?
Yeah, it's my work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like she told you, I have gone, I have violated a lot of rules I learned from school of playwriting. And because I found life to be like a broken mirror, so I stitch things together. It could be even an article from a newspaper that speaks to me in that moment. So she's going to read it.
So I'm not the performer, but I'll do my very best. Below the village of Rusumo, the river Kagera flows into a steep ravine that forms the natural border between Tanzania and Rwanda. As it sweeps down from the highlands, it gathers into its current huge clumps of elephant grass and numerous small trees. These are then swept and tossed across the Rusumo Falls. In the late spring of 1994, it was quite the same with human corpses. They too rose and dropped, twisted and turned, and came back bouncing over the Rusumo Falls. The genocide of the Tutsis had been progressing at a fearsome rate for more than a month. By the time it would finish, up to 1 million people would have been dead. Consider the mathematics of this horror. In 100 days, 1 million. I leaned over the bridge and noticed that 2 bodies had become lodged in the rocks at the side of the gorge. One was that of a man, and the other was that of a baby, between 6 and 12 months old. I could see that the child had been killed with a machete, a gash across its skull. I stepped back from the river. I did not ever want to see that again. And on the journey north to Kigali, where the war still raged, I kept asking myself the same question. What kind of man would kill a baby? What kind of man would kill a baby? Later in Kigali, I think to myself yet again, what kind of man would kill a baby? A man not born to hate, but one who has learned hatred. A man like you, or a man like me.
You see, how much more powerful?
Thank you. That's why we opened the floor.
I have a question.
Because
Hi.
you do a lot of things. I've been living in Rwanda for 23 years. Sometimes it's hard for me to say everything I've done in 23 years. But thank you for asking.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, I have a question. Hi. I'm wondering whether there are any lessons we can learn from Rwanda when it comes to healing in situations where conflict hasn't ended. At the moment, Nigeria is going through multiple conflicts, many are driven by identity politics. And so in many of the conflicts that we see, language, tribe, and to a certain extent, sometimes religion is playing a role. We're particularly seeing, and I did an article a few years ago that I called the Genocide Playbook, because my people, the Fulani people in Nigeria, have been demonized steadily over the last sort of 6-7 years. These are nomads, mostly, who move with their cattle across West Africa. And the result is they've become fair game. Their children are getting killed, their wives. In return, what has happened is a few of them have taken up arms as well. So they're the ones sort of menacing part of the North as bandits. And it's become a really complex, murky conflict. Some of us are sort of struggling to find a way to begin a process of forcing conversations around how we can solve the conflicts, how we can heal, even as those conflicts are still raging on. And I just wondered whether there's anything at all in your experience that might be helpful to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think for me, what I saw really very impactful in Rwanda was young people taking the mic themselves in schools and starting clubs around unity kind of clubs, just beginning debates on this kind of conversation. It's always very important that young people are involved at the end of the day, regardless of how complicated it may be. And if it can be introduced in schools and just have clubs around peace clubs, you know, peace clubs, it may be drama or poetry or I don't know, or debates. But what I really liked was just young people, and I love working with young people. It's just beginning clubs. Even if it's one club in this school, it will start another club in others. It catches like a fire. And once you arm young people, because at the end of the day, you either use them right or wrong, they can kill or destroy a community. Yet they look like they are not part of any conversation, but they actually are silent. It's silent power seated somewhere. So for me, I think engaging young people in these conversations is very important.
But I hope you're also being asked by other countries to come and advise. I know you're going to Brazil later this year and to Nigeria. What is it that people are asking you to do, and what are you finding in those societies?
What they're really wanting to start is beginning like spaces of arts and humanities. When we begin a space like at the festival we do is around arts and humanities, and when we invite artists from across the globe, and they visit the genocide memorial, and they get to understand all these stages to destruction or to violence, they are cautioned and they start engaging using art to change. They become agents of change. So that's why I really always want to push to empower young people, to make them agents of change and talk about real issues. And there's nothing really like as anything above them. And what we think is complicated is actually okay for them to talk about it. There's nothing bad talking about to a 10-year-old about genocide. Because it also begins in schools. They bully each other, and that's where dehumanization actually starts from, the culture of dehumanization. Bullying is dehumanization. So just to know these kind of signs in the communities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think we'll take more questions. Nozi, and then over there.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you so much just for your presence and every little word that you've spoken, big and small words today on the stage. I want to start off with an apology for centering South Africa in my question. I think when we talk about the genocide, there have been so many moments where we center South Africa too soon. And it just reminds me again of the spotlight of the media in that crucial period that it was also shining on South Africa instead of being focused on Rwanda at the time. So please accept my apology for that. My question is that it seems as if in South Africa, we're very much still stuck in our many cracks. In a post-apartheid democracy, we're still stuck because of our inequality. We're still stuck because of the racism. We're still stuck because of the social tensions that feed into all of these. My question to you, and I think Heather's asked it in this last question, but maybe you can help me, is if you were talking to us as South Africans, where do we start? Or how do we start our conversation? How do we begin to build our muscle of having the right conversation as a country? Because we're stuck in the cousins of cracks very much so right now.
I think, Heather, you can help me on this one. You remember in the bio reading where we're reading, like being stuck in that spiral. Like a spiral goes like that.
The ants.
The ants. And then one ant decides to go the different direction. I think we need to pay attention to that, or pay a visit to ourselves. Am I in that spiral of those ants, and how do I break that spiral? Because otherwise it becomes like, it's like a rhythm of some sort. It's just going there and it's acceptable and keeps going and going and going. But I think there's a need to, become that ant that breaks away from that spiral and just listen to your instinct and your voice. I don't know how even I started this myself, because I was a refugee born in a family of scientists. Nobody was an artist except me. And everyone was always going to hospitals. It was just, I just went my own direction. And it was not easy going that direction, because my father was like, we're at earn you bread. I'm like, do you need bread in your life alone? I went my own direction. Little did I know that I was being wired into going back to my own country, and I started using art as a weapon of reconstruction. So where is that? Where do you feel like it's becoming routine, it's becoming acceptable, it's becoming that music you dance to, and you create your own rhythm and break from that?
And what do you say, Hope, to people who, the idea that we must heal first and then we can vision, then we can dream, then we can work towards something that's sustainable. And we can't, because society is moving on and certain things need to be done. But we are where we're building on shaky foundations because of the things that Noisy just spoke about, and others, the other question about your society and community. So how do you do this simultaneously?
But Heather, one thing that always confuses me, and this is a conversation I always have alone in my room. Like, what is a society? What is a government? Is it a building? What is a church? Is it the concrete I see? Then I realize that it's me. It's my heart. And what is that in my heart? Because if I'm not steady myself and recollected myself, and if I'm broken inside myself, I cannot stand on a steady knee. I cannot get on a steady knee to run a race. So we are trying to run a race before we get on a steady knee. And once you're on that steady knee, then the rest of people, you can run that race. But we are not steady inside. We need to pay a visit to self. Where am I myself? Am I bound by things that have bound me? Or can I take captive of things that have bound me? I think that's where there's what is that thing is holding me? Sometimes it's my mind and things I've stored in my mind that I need to get rid of. So I think I need to first recollect self, get on a steady knee so I can run a race. I don't know whether I answered any of that question, but I think it starts with self.
Yeah, I think a lot of these ideas, my hope is that it infuses our conversations over the next few days, and we all walk away with a question perhaps, and not necessarily all the answers. There's another question. Yeah?
They're saying no to questions. Yeah?
No, I thought you said one more. One more. Yeah. Come on.
Yes, because we're running out, our minute is running out.
Yeah.
Just
okay, first of all, it's very apt that your name is Hope, and I think it's very beautiful that your name is Hope, because that's really what we need in a time that's full of so much despair. So I'm quite fascinated in what South Africa can learn from Rwanda. And I'm thinking about how we're living in the maybe unfinished business of what was our TRC. And how we are currently seeing a lot of families who are coming up against still wanting justice for that moment. But you spoke a lot about the ritualization of memory. So you have your 100 days where you're remembering, you're cleaning, you're wearing white, and I think that sometimes that is something that is missing here with us. Many families went missing, many people did not get the opportunity to bury people. And that's like a rite of passage for many people, and that's a lack of closure. So I just want your perspective on the role of art in ritualization and memory where there's no closure. I hope that was clear. Thanks.
Thank you. So Hope has always been a funny name, but it's my name. I was given the name Hope when the cohort of people born around my period as refugees were given things or words or names, we call them, that their parents never had. Like hope, faith, joy, and we know the power of words. I can instantly get very optimistic and you'll get worried around me because I've never believed in anything like fear. I've always been very strong. And, I've always banked my hopes in faith and knowing that things will happen. But yeah, the role of art is, you know, one thing with art, it's the master key. It gets to places where nobody else will go. I think we saw that during COVID, people played music. Why? Because music took them, transformed them. It was an escape to go to a space where they reconnected and you know, found themselves alive. So art is the same, and I think it has really played a crucial role in Rwanda, where even policies were brought in place, but people could not really like understand them, but art made them understand them. And I remember the first task we were given was to, when they're going to use the traditional form courts of justice, the traditional gachacha. I don't know whether you've heard about gachacha. They are not formal courts. And they're bringing them, but people are not like, we cannot, this kind of courts are about goats and what. It's not about really massacres of people. But we used art to sensitize communities and understand that this kind of solution is going to help communities come out and speak and confess. And we came up with a title called The Liberating Truth. That was our campaign on something people that could not easily get. So art has the power to unlock conversation. Art has the power to transform communities, but it has to be very intentional. It has to be based on research. What kind of crack are we responding to with this kind of art? Yeah, because sometimes people think art is just entertainment. At first, when my dad was asking me about whether bread would get me anywhere, where art would buy me my bread, I had no clue that actually art was going to become my gun back to Rwanda. As people used guns, for me I used a gun. Art was my weapon. And it was a friendly way. People say, oh, art, let's sing, but what are we singing? Let's write poetry, but what are we writing? We wrote words that we wanted to claim. We used words to reclaim dignity from the people that has lost dignity. So art reclaims and brings back what we have lost. So let's not underestimate the power of art. It's quite really powerful. It can kill or make.
We are out of time, but I just want to thank you, Hope, for the work that you do and the way you bring yourself to your own cracks and then share what you learn with the rest of the world. I'm looking forward to walking a much longer journey with you, and just thank you for what you've brought here for all of us today.
Hello, and I know that some of us still wanted more questions, but the joy of having 4 days together is that we get to do that after this moment. So now you're in for another treat. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dominique Botha, award-winning novelist and poet. I said to her, your bio is lengthy, what would you like me to read? Because I can read everything. She said, no, just keep it brief. So I'm going to let her work and her words move us now. So please help me to invite Dominique to the stage.
Dele asked me to read some uplifting poems to follow the conversation on Rwanda. My heart sank because I only write depressing poems. So instead, I'm going to start with a light-hearted vignette I wrote for a magazine, set in the valley over the hill, that our unstoppable festival organizer, Dele Olejede, and I both are lucky enough to call home. The drawings you will see are made by an artist friend called John Murray, who picked up a porcupine quill one weekend on a visit and dipped it into ink. The piece is called My Last House. Call me Dominic. After a certain age, a woman becomes a man. I am the owner of 300 pear trees, planted by that old rogue Cecil John Rhodes more than a century ago. My sliver of land lies at the foot of a granite colossus, encircled by a halo of hamlets. There are candlewoods and salamanders and cucamakrankas. There is sugar bush and leopard and waterfalls in winter. The devil also lives there. It is heavenly. An old drifter once told me, make yourself a refuge in the mountains before it is too late. People who have lost their bearings always live in too many places looking for home. I know of what I speak. The for sale sign was rusted through and draped in wisteria. A man sitting on a strip opposite the property said to me, you and your people must speak directly to the owner. Colored people don't easily sell their homes, and if so, preferably to other colored people. After the sale was concluded, I stood here aghast and wondered what had possessed us to buy such a pile of ruins. There were holes in the roof, rats on the walls, and weeds on the lands. The greatest challenge, however, was the Department of Heritage. In fact, they should be called the Impartment of Umbrage. As long as historical buildings rot, they are inert. But when you show an interest in conservation, you raise the sleeping dragon to ire. Their raison d'etre, a punishment seeking a crime, like the Russian Secret Service of old. But it was worth it. Bethlehem Farm is not my first home, but I hope it is our last. Our mud and reed house sparkles like a wedding cake in the sun, and the ceilings are high enough for a soprano to hit the top note of Mozart's De Höllerach against the rafters. Because there's no house cat, field mice jeté across the yard with balletic flourish. Sometimes when I'm alone at home, I amble from room to room, hugging the curtains, because I love them like children. For 200 years, my people farmed up north along a muddy river in the Orange Free State. They planted maize and raised cattle, flourishing and fading like the grass on the riverbanks. Heart and seed grass, moon grass, herringbone and red grass, and khaki bos, the drop of Irish blood that trickled in after the Boer War. And now I'm back in the valley, in the Cape, where my ancestor Abraham Hercules left 2 centuries ago with his flock of merino sheep and his wife who was known for her beautiful singing voice. It is futile to expect anything from the government, he wrote in a letter dating 1784. Plus ça change. My sister lives beyond the river, and we crisscross the bridge to make merry or draw swords in moods mandated by the moon. My sister inherited the beautiful velvet skin of our ancestor, the Bengali slave Katrein de Grote, and I her volatility. Katrein was banished to the Cape because she killed her suitor with a pickaxe. According to records, she was aiming for his privates. In the surrounding villages, there are singing priests, swirling doves, and choirs caroling in glad adoration. The world here is still biblical. Even the cultivar of my pear trees is bon chrétien, that is to say, good Christians. But it was a land of plagues before I could inherit the kingdom. First heritage, then the big fire, then the great drought, then the great seclusion. But when the sun sinks behind the Helshoogte Pass, the cliffs turn juniper gin pink, heavenly. In the distance, the valley fans open on the prison where Madiba was robbed of his youth. Only the name has changed. On Sundays, there is a phone-in program on the radio where messages from family members are read to the prisoners. Mama wonders if you are warm enough. Child, we miss you. Ridevan Windvogel, I forgive you. Once a month, the ghost of Queen Elizabeth calls on me for afternoon tea. She's the quintessential English lady with pearls, blue eyes, and good deeds, the backbone of the valley bent double with age. She tells me, this place is like trifle pudding, my dear. The white layer on top is rich and thick. She brings me bags of clivia seeds, and I can see she wants me to take over her role as our dear Lady of Providence in the community. When she leaves at dusk, like the owl of Minerva in her old silver Mercedes, she rolls down the window to impart a final aphorism. Remember, my dear, In the end, farming makes us all poor, but at least you live the right sort of life. What follows are 4 short poems, Dele, don't stress. I'm going to read in my mother tongue, Afrikaans, mindful of the wisdom of Ngugi wa Thiong'o. The first poem is an autobiographical poem of sorts. I grew up on a farm at the height of apartheid, right in the center of the country, far from the bright lights, but close to the soil. My kinders is ryk, maar my kinders is arm. Voor jy my joune gemaak het, was ek Andries en Sandra se dogter, van die plaas Rietpan, distrik Botawil. Gedra na die doopvond in 'n rok van oorlewering en linte. In vioolkraal se voorkamer, vol familie en meubels, ingeseën met 'n sponskoek, oorstrooi in 'n fyn suikermandela. Gebak deur Anna wat my groot gemaak het, totdat ek self 'n perd kon teken en droom. Die maan is 'n emaljebak met roeskolle, vol magou wat Anna brou. En om en by maandeind bars Anna se sog uit die hok en vrede die maan weer op. Somers het versuil soos verlore albasters, agter tuinstoele so swaar soos 'n dooie kalf. Op grasperke, ingedrink in die lang blou skaduwees van 'n veraf rammelende belofte. Tromme het snags nog gerol, soos die trein oor sy spore na Groenebloemstasie. Swiepend deur sonsteek, modder, weerlig en wind, om die oes van die land te kom haal. En piepende donskuikens, geel soos mimosa balletjies af te laai, om groot gebroei te word in Anna se jaard. Totdat sy kom aanklop het by die agterdeur met 'n gat in die kop, die haar man se swaaiende byl toegedien, vol end van die maand woede. Daar is gejaag deur nag en reën, en maat gehuil, terwyl Anna se sinne uitgebloei het op haar skoot. Nou sit Anna al baie jare in die son, in Klerksdorp se lokasie, om valke en muskeljaatkatte wat nie bestaan nie, van die missies se lank vergaande pluimvee weg te hou. W.H. Auden wrote a wonderful elegy in honor of W.B. Yeats when he died. And from it the line reads, Ireland hurt you into poetry. My elder brother Paul died from a drug overdose when we were in our 20s, and his death hurt me into writing. The poem that follows is a recent revisiting of a distant grief. Die kind wat geen perke geken het nie, the child who knew no limits. Jou broeders en susters was so hartseer soos speenkalvers in die reën. Nat snoete in die yster drukgang, van bloederige naalstring tot slagpaal. Pa het in sy bakkie gesit en rook. Ma het die goedkoopste kus gekies om die volkies te wys, mens mors nie geld op dooies nie. Jou kus het woekery verspreek, sonder die donker viool van jou hart. Die pulsende klok van jou heroïese vreugdes, onder verhewe kruissteek van spreeuklaue gestil. Op 'n kattevalk van planke was jou vel groen soos jong piesangs, wat ons by die kruidenier van Madeira Fruits gekoop het. Hy het nooit Engels kon leer nie. Wat het ons geweet van die luifore, wingerde en kantwerk van sy vaderland? Met ons skurwe hakskene, veldsere en douwwurm, het ons gelag vir die porra. Die ure het saffraan gesprinkel oor die gebarste appels van jou oë. Ons middags van die alledaagse, deur jou gesien het alles mooi geword. Die kere toe ma soms gelukkig was, haar stemme geskeerde blom van sy. In die kombuis waarin ons gewals het, met 'n mandjie vol eiers en vere en skuit, om meel deur die sif te mors. Niemand woon meer daar nie. Die vlei fluister deur die gange. Uile staan wag op niks. Jou grafsteen het geswel, soos 'n brood uit die soeie. Die vryheid waarna jy gesmag het, Andries en Sandra se oudste, mooiste, slimste, was 'n skag in leemte gedolwe en 'n skuiling teen somer. Ons het boksertwak gerol om 'n papery van nagte te blus en dronk op jou graf gedans. 'n Koeltjie brand nog soms in pa se oog, fyn linte rook uit die sprokkelhout van katarakte. Wanneer hy tastend deur rammelende laaie vir Zambak, veters, kaart en transport die God in hom laat huil. Ons strydros wat stotterend, weerligkettings roggelend oor die aarde sleep. Gloria Sarobe, my husband's other boss, recently published a wonderful book, An Ode to My Mother-in-Law, that he brought home, which I'm currently reading and I do recommend. Likewise, in the following poem, I pay homage to my mother-in-law's mother, so my granny-in-law. In fact, I'm going to read it in English, just in case she's listening, because she would approve of the English. Some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. A taxi collided with a hearse, making Gran, punctual to a fault in life, half an hour late for her own funeral. The scent of St. Joseph's lilies doused the church lavishly in the perfume of the grand dame laid to rest, in a coffin of braided wattle, discreet and tasteful to the very end, surrounded by a bouquet of granddaughters like carnations with teeth. Grandsons skulking in their father's suits, my mother-in-law with her pearls, her brother with shaking hands. In the eulogy he asks, what does one say about a woman's life? With his father it was easier. The boards, the posts, the honorary doctorate. But Gran knew who she was. You're not really Afrikaans, she told me once. In her world, it was a great compliment. Her eyes sparkling sapphires pinned onto the silks of her glass, with a perfect imprint of lipstick on Sunset's customary whiskey glass. The tally of a life does not lie in acronyms, nor in a collection of porcelain frogs, not in a sublunary hierarchy, however discriminate in calibration, however sharp its wheeling teeth. I know who she was. And I salute you, lady, who wanted to celebrate 100 so that the Queen of England would send a telegram of congratulations, even though the consulate was a few days late. Offspring listening with half an ear. We lost an empress here. And to end, a short prayer to a splendid indigenous tree known as the Cape Holly, that lives with its roots in the water, is green all year long and full of feasting songbirds when it goes into fruit. Cape Holly, Ilex Metis. You are the first God, Ilex Metis. Give me your daily, glossy-leafed stanza, breadfruit prayer, imploration of maiden hair. A berry flood of communion blood, our flesh grown dark in your mottled bark. A choir of tinkers host the Holy Ghost. You are your own offering. A tree grows on its rot, like a writer and a god. I want to lengthen your shade in a broth of my sundered bones, in a libation of ripening sods. God of water and of leaves, I believe in the miracle of trees. Thank you.
did not lie, right? Another round, please. Thank you so much, Dominique. We're now going to break for lunch, so we'll come back into this room at 1:45. Lunch will be served out on the patio. Enjoy, and we'll see you back after lunch.